Thank you, Deb. Just your music is so transformative. It's beautiful. So, thank you. And the theme for February 2021 is One Journey, Many Paths. The topic for today is Journey to Freedom. So, for today, well, Reverend Kathleen has asked me to do this once a month, so you'll be listening to this from me more often. But I'm going to be sharing a poem today that I wrote last year. This came out of it's called "The Choice of a Response," and this came out of last year when we were all struggling when George Floyd, the incident happened, and how just shocking and devastating that was, and how the Black Lives Matter, all the activism emerged, and that put me in the path of conflict and deciding what is my path to do. Because on one hand, there was this powerful call to fight, to be an activist, to really break things down the way they have been. But that didn't speak to me in terms of all our practices in science of mind and spiritual living about trying to hold peace and hold love. So it seems like too extreme. Like, how can you hold love for perpetrators who are doing such horrible things in the world? And so that question is very relevant even today. And that's where my poem, like out of reading Ernest Holmes, talking to Reverend Kathleen, and being sort of in some of these immersed in the thoughts, the Spirit spoke to me, and I kind of found my answer. So this poem is an answer that takes us from how can you not, like, from going from activism to love, how can that show up in our everyday life through the race consciousness, being a human race? How can we practice that path of love while still trying to solve the burning fires in our world today? So here it is, the choice of response. Um, I struggle to comprehend, like you and you and you, ready to trade in my peace for an armor of activism. Ready to trade in my peace for an armor of activism. I thought Gandhi and MLK were once right, but perhaps now passé. The more the knowledge is known, the greater our injustices grown. Yesterday's Ahmad is today's George. When does this end? How does this end? Can this ever end? When does this end? How does this end? Can this ever end? These are the questions that don't have a right to go away. They plague and they torment, but they wake us in ways anew. The questions that don't have a right to go away, they plague and they torment, but they wake us in ways anew. As my soul tossed and turned, and my heart combated with its peace, a light has come into my heart, a ray of hope, a point of entry. The questions continue to question, but what I now see is this: the juice is not in the plaguing question. Instead, it's in the response that the divine lives. It's in the response that the divine lives, the response to raise your trust. And from that place of belief, bless your your perpetrators, their trespasses and all, for it is still there, deeply buried, being a call for love. Bless their divinity, that their divinity rise in their heart, for it is still there, deeply buried, being a call for love. Monstrous action, but not a monster. We have to believe the best and bless. Stay in that higher place. Turn it over to grace. In our response is the divine, a miracle, our highest action. And in that space between us, then, letting divinity work in widening circles. In that space between us, then, let divinity work in widening circles. Maybe this is too simple. Maybe this sounds naive. But in this moment, this is what's mine to do. and my spirit has led me here with hope, grace, trust, and surrender. So today, I leave you all with blessings. May your hearts heal and may the spirits rise. May our collective consciousness bring light and tenderness. In the darkest of hearts and fearful souls, bring light and tenderness in the darkest of hearts and fearful souls. May each person be healed and touched. This may be Pollyanna-ish, but I am trusting universal laws, nay, commanding them, claiming to show us the light, to lead us, to bring forth miracles, and give us the eyes to see and the hearts to feel. To bring forth miracles, to give us the eyes to see and the hearts to feel. And so it is. So let us reflect on this affirmation of truth as you say with me, love acts through me and the law of love frees us all. So let us turn to the most freeing of all, the light and love of CSL Delaware, Reverend Kathleen.
Oh my goodness, that was so beautiful, Ami. I had read it ahead of time, but there's something about speaking it out loud that helps it to sink in. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So this month, one journey, many paths, and it all begins with ultimate truth, ultimate reality, that there is only one power, one mountain with many paths, one tree with many branches. And there is ultimately one journey that we all take, no matter what our background. It's the journey from the illusion of separation to the truth of oneness. It's the journey from the head that talks about the divine to the heart that feels it, lives it, expresses the divine presence that we are. It's the path of the mystic that I'm talking about here today, which is the embodiment of the divine. So today's topic, the journey to freedom, and Ami really brought forth some really powerful things to think about and to dwell upon about what this thing called journey to freedom means. Because in this world, you know, this is what we call the world of effects, but it's what's happening and it's affecting people, is that because of certain laws and certain attitudes, that there are people in our world and in our country that are not experiencing the greatest level of freedom, the freedom to fair housing, the freedom to an excellent education, and job opportunities, and so on. And that's our Black and Brown communities. Many have transcended it and even gotten to the White House. And yet there are many who are still under this kind of almost silent oppression. And so as we end this month, I would like to really have us focus in on, where does this journey to freedom start? And we know it begins within, just like every aspect of our lives, because of who we are. And so the journey to freedom then is a journey of being and living the truth of who we are, that truth of oneness, that truth of love, and that truth of freedom, and living it out in every aspect of our lives, including our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Martin Luther King Jr. Is and has been a real inspiration to me. I just yesterday concluded 4 weeks of a course called Lead Like Martin, based on his servant leadership principles. Very inspiring. And Martin Luther King Jr. chose to live his spiritual principles, even in the face of oppression, and therefore adopted and used a tool of activism based on the spiritual principle of peace and loving kindness, nonviolent protest or peaceful protest, whatever you want to call it. And because Gandhi had had such success in using this principle of peaceful protest and staying in the heart, staying in a place of compassion instead of combativeness, an entire nation, the entire nation of India, had been freed from British rule by this method, very powerful method. Why? Because it comes from the power of the heart, which is so much more powerful ultimately than using physical force. And Martin Luther King studied this and he knew this. And as a result, there was progress. I think we need to acknowledge the progress. The Civil Rights Amendment was progress, and there has been progress. And we know that there needs to be more progress. But there is a lot to learn by the method in which he made progress that comes from the heart. I'd like to share with you, and he also had, there's another aspect of it too. It wasn't just using that means, but there was something else that Martin Luther King knew. He knew that to motivate people, they had to have a vision. His "I have a dream" speech was just a part of what he had been doing all along in terms of having people believe in themselves, as well as see the possibilities of what life could be like when everyone worked and lived together, a world that worked for all. And CSL, Centers for Spiritual Living, the greater organization that we belong to, has a statement called the Global Vision, which echoes Martin Luther King Jr. Listen to this. It says, "We envision a world in which all people live and grow as one global family that respects and honors the interconnectedness of all life. We envision a world where each and every person has enough food, a home, and a sense of belonging, a world of peace and harmony, enfranchisement and justice." So we're all given this thing called free will, the ability to choose what to think, what to say, and what to do. And because we are free beings, we can choose to use this law of freedom in a way that is a misuse of it. We could call it a misuse of it, which ends up appearing in the world as something that we have called evil. And the word evil, I just want to remind all of us, comes from a term that means miss the mark. It means missing the mark. The good news is that when we turn away from that and begin to use the law of freedom for good, that the evil disappears. So when we no longer indulge in it, it disappears, because that's the way universal law works. So today I want to talk a little bit about what this journey to freedom entails. I mentioned a little bit about it, but I also want to mention that we have to leave some things behind in order to take this journey. You know, if we're burdened with things that don't serve us, it's like carrying or dragging a heavy sack behind us as we're going down the road of freedom. Mr. Rogers, I think, put it really beautifully. He said, to get somewhere new, we have to leave somewhere else behind. That somewhere else is a state of mind. We could call it the ego. And it made me think of Swami Beyondananda's mantra for getting rid of the ego. Ego, egoing, egone. So let's remember that one when something comes up that we want to let go of. Ego, egoing, egone. On the road to freedom, we must leave behind things like, well, it's really the old version of ourselves that's stuck in the patterns of fear and separation. It's in order to step into the full divinity of who we are, we must leave behind things like envy and jealousy, and self-seeking, self-glorification, prejudice, bigotry, and more often for people in the New Thought movement, it's things like not enough, thinking that we are not enough, not realizing the divine magnificence of who we are. Or it could be apathy, just not caring enough about what's happening to our fellow humans, being, too focused on our own lives. So all of it must be left behind. And so let us remember, ego, egoing, egone. I recently just finished reading a book by Michelle Obama called Becoming Michelle Obama. And Michelle's journey to freedom involved, among other things, going to marriage counseling with Barack. And she said that she knew he was going there for the same reason. She knew she was going there to convince the counselor to convince Barack that he needed to change. And what she learned is that the counselor did not take sides at all, which is what a good counselor is supposed to do, and instead supported each one of them in shifting their perspectives. So instead of trying to change each other, Michelle and Barack were led to or supported in making some decisions about how they were going to shift and change. And she shared what hers were. She said she had to leave behind the tendency to envy Barack for his ability to get a regular workout. She was raising 2 children at the time, 2 daughters. And she also had a full-time career. And this was before they were in the White House. And so what she discovered is that she could get her workout in at the gym by getting the support of her mother to come in and take care of the girls for certain times each week so that she could accomplish that. She also realized that rather than being angry at Barack for not getting to dinner on time, she could just make sure and serve dinner at 6:30 every night, and therefore honor her daughters and her own routine. And if he got there, fine. And if he didn't, he didn't. And then she was able to let go of that. And I think one of the ultimates that she had to let go of is trying to get him to quit politics, realizing that this was his calling, his destiny. And that ultimately she realized that she too, in the White House, could make an amazing difference. So in order for her to step into that higher version of herself, she had to let go of patterns that didn't serve her. Ego, egoing, egone. So the road to freedom. The road to freedom is something that is deeply entwined with this thing called the golden rule. The golden rule. You should treat others the way you want to be treated. And there's another version of that. It's called the platinum rule. Have you heard of that one? I know I've introduced it before. The platinum rule goes like this: treat others the way they want to be treated. So what that means is, and I was thinking about love languages and how I learned with love languages that we all have ways in which we feel loved and all ways in which we give love. And Dan and I had to learn that we were giving from a place in our love languages that was not in alignment with what we wanted to receive. So it took some, we went to some marriage counseling, and we learned to communicate with each other and find out what it was that each other wanted from the other person in terms of expressions of love. And so that was a big, huge shifting point for both of us. The platinum rule: treat others the way they want to be treated. And, the golden rule is beautiful as well. The whole idea is to develop a heart of compassion, to be willing to put yourself in the place of the other person, and not only feel empathy for them, but also compassion is about moving into action, moving into sacred service on behalf of the other person, to support them in realizing a greater version of their lives, or things that would support them. Again, I'd like to share with you an illustration from the life of Michelle Obama. From her personal experience as a woman of color, she knew what it was like to be poor, to have a shade of skin that was some shade of brown or black. And she knew that if she were to succeed, that she had to work hard, that she had to find her voice, and she had to overcome a lot of stereotypes that were thrust upon her. She also acknowledged that she had a lot of support along the way from her mother, from relatives, and from other women who saw her potential and supported her in succeeding in her career. And so she knew that as First Lady in the White House, that she could make a profound difference. She could use that position to make a profound difference in the lives of girls everywhere. And so what she did is she actually had a group of girls that were from local schools in Washington come into the White House. It was kind of, it was done in a very subtle way. It wasn't, so that it protected the girls who were involved. And she matched them up with mentors, people in the White House who some people who were in her staff, and had special programs for them to support them in becoming all they could be. And on a greater level, on a global level, she and Barack raised billions of dollars to help girls around the world get the schooling that they deserved, which included training the people in the Peace Corps to go out into these different countries and get educational programs started. To this day, Michelle Obama continues to empower girls of color to be all that they can be. And she also, while she was in the White House, she did an amazing amount of things. I just really had no clue all of the things that she was involved in. She also knew that childhood obesity was a national problem. She actually knew it was a problem in adults too, but she tried to start with the children and up-level the kinds of foods that children were getting in school breakfasts and lunches, and also what she called Let's Move, active schools program, which was getting kids to commit to 60 minutes a day of activity. She also planted a vegetable garden with the help of some local fifth graders from one of the schools in Washington, and produced a lot of fresh foods that were used in food banks and things like that in the area. And so what she was able to do was to make a difference, be in a place of compassion and sacred service while in the White House. I don't know if you know this, but she and Jill Biden also created something called joining forces to help persuade businesses to hire and train 1.5 million veterans and military spouses. Michelle, to me, exemplifies someone who practiced not only the golden rule, but the platinum rule. A woman of compassion, a woman who exemplified sacred service. She saw and she heard, and she had experienced herself the suffering that can go on for people of color, and she did something about it. So this month, Black History Month, is a really great month to end with this idea of the journey to freedom, because what I truly have come to understand is that my freedom is intertwined with the freedom of all people everywhere, that we're all in this together. So as we bring this month, Black History Month, to a close, I'd like us to take a moment, and this is something that I have learned about how we really take things with us and really change ourselves. I'd like you to stretch and breathe. Ah, yes, close your eyes, turn within, and ask yourself, what is of highest value for me from what I heard this month about one journey, many paths, maybe particularly today, the journey to freedom, this thing about compassion. What is my takeaway? What is of value to me for my life? Take a few moments of silence and listen to what comes up. And I invite you, if you have a pen and paper, to go ahead and jot that down for yourself. And then if you have a prayer partner, verbalize it with your prayer partner. Or you could even put it in the chat box if you want to write it out in the chat box and share it with everybody. What was your greatest insight, your greatest takeaway? What is of greatest value for you from this month? I invite you to go ahead and put it in the chat box as well. For me, the greatest value that came for me was from reading Michelle Obama's book and taking this course by about Martin Luther King's leadership. And it was a comment at the very end of the class that really caught my attention of this Martin Luther King class. It was that the most important leadership quality, above and beyond all of the skills that we think are so important, is a mindset of service and a heart of compassion. A mindset of service and a heart of compassion. So it has inspired me to continue to develop my own compassion and to act more fully on that compassion. So you heard my commitment out loud. I'm making a commitment publicly because I'm really holding myself to this. So you and I are the light and love of the world. We are the way in which God works we are the hands, the heart, the voice of this thing called love. We are the imaginal cells in the caterpillar of the old paradigm, right? The old paradigm of separation. We are the imaginal cells on the journey to freedom by gathering with other imaginal cells to form the new butterfly of humanity that truly fulfills our vision of heaven on earth, a world that works for all. So our journey to freedom then is collective. So I invite you to leave behind all that is, egoing, and to use the spiritual principle of visioning. Ask yourself, what does heaven on earth look like, feel like, sound like? What does a world that works for everyone feel like, look like, sound like, because it'll keep us growing and moving in the right direction. And to follow Michelle's and Martin's example, to choose a mindset of service and a heart of compassion, and continue to learn about and be inspired by the many contributions of Black Americans. So, my friends, I know there are several things I'm asking you to do. Choose one of them. Anything that continues to move you in the direction of being the light of the world that you are. I love you all so dearly. Blessings and namaste. And so now I would like to again invite back our beloved Deb Chamberlain Wynn.